like great. You know, like you are one of the guests I haven't met. This is the first time that we meet, and like I have to say, it's kind of like feels like we met before. I know this seems like cliche, but it's like when you start talking to someone, it sounds like so familiar. Yeah, I'm very happy that you're here.
Well, it's great to meet you. I feel the same way. I feel like we've met before
Yeah, right.
somehow. Just
This is like what I call no, I mean what I call is known as the Nietzsche theory of the eternal recurrence, which is actually very well articulated during like one of the episodes of True Detective, the TV series, which is based on a book that was written by Thomas Ligotti. But the theories say that whatever we do, whatever like environment we are in, we have been doing that forever. So this conversation has been happening like for infinite amount of times.
Well, I feel like I've been in this industry forever, so absolutely.
7 question, like the 7 C's, is gonna be a haste into your mind. So I'm gonna run away with a little story, hopefully. Okay, let's start with the first question. The black hole found on the island of South Andros is a large, isolated column about 47 meters deep and formed by chemical erosion. Its depth replicates ocean conditions from billions of years ago. It's an amazing blueprint that makes it possible for future generations to study our planets. If you were to leave a blueprint on the state of advertising for future generations, what kind of condition would you recreate? And what would be the essential element for advertising to prosper at the top of your list?
Great question. I think the environment that you need to create is one of safety.
Right.
It's first and foremost because, I mean, as you know, when you are in a room with people and you're throwing out crazy ideas, you have to feel safe that you can say anything and it's a safe environment. And I think that the two things that are essential, those essential elements, collaboration and curiosity. I find that the most creative people I know are the most curious. They're reading everything. They're watching everything. They're looking at everything. They're experiencing everything. When they go to parties, they're watching everything and they're observing the behavior and they're listening very carefully. And that curiosity turns into amazing insight into human behavior, human emotion. And then when you're working in a safe environment with other people, that collaboration, damn, I mean, it creates magic.
So your blueprint will have 2C, curiosity and collaboration.
Yeah.
That's like pretty awesome, like from a visual standpoint.
Yeah, look, when you can stay curious and not be judgmental,
Of course.
I mean, that's
That's quite
everything.
difficult, It's like I think like also like in our industry, it's very easy to get quickly judgmental. But I definitely agree on curiosity. It's such like it's one of the most common denominator between like among like creatives that have they are voracious. Voracious is like that's probably
Absolutely.
like a good adjective to use. Like some of the people I know that are the most creative are truly voracious. Like they eat everything they have in front of them. Like and they read like everything possibly. They just happen to be in their hands and yeah.
Yeah,
It's true.
absolutely. I mean, when I'm meeting people for the first time or I'm interviewing people, I always ask, you know, what's the last thing you've read?
Right.
What's the last podcast you've
Right.
listened to? What's the app that all of a sudden you're using that you didn't use 3 months ago? Film, you know, all of those inputs all come in and you jumble them around and it comes back out in a different form and it becomes an amazing piece of communication.
Definitely.
But it starts with absorbing as much as humanly
Curiosity.
possible.
Second question, by measuring the amount of remaining radiocarbon in ocean waters at different depth and in different places around the world, We know that the deep Pacific hold the ocean's oldest water, which have been out of contact with the atmosphere for about 1,000 years before they mix with the surface again. Bridging the aging concept to our industry, how do you determine time? What's old and what's new in our industry? And do you think is there such a thing as timeless creativity? I mean, when you look at advertising, we are, I mean, not to touch upon ageism, but we are obsessed, we are condemned to, 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 to feel the impact of age, right? Like, and it's a big issue, right?
Yeah.
Like, so is there anything as timeless creativity, and what's old and what's new?
I think timeless, when you're talking about timeless creativity, for me, it's about ideas. That's the timeless part.
Right.
What is the idea that you can create on for time and time and time again? It's all about that core idea, that core insight, that core human emotion that you can bring to a project. So to me, idea is timeless. The reason why people talk about certain campaigns for years and years and years is because the insight and the
Right.
emotion was timeless. It could span executional norms over years.
But do you think that timeless creativity, a timeless idea, does it need to contain certain kind of ingredient? I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
You read like, okay, so Catcher in the Rye was written like, what, 40 years ago, 50 years ago? Like crazy,
More
right?
than that, yes,
But
80
till
years
this
ago.
day, it's still very a contemporary
Sure.
body of work.
Sure.
Like you can truly, like, I mean, with the adjustments on in language, but the story itself is timeless.
Absolutely, because everyone remembers a moment in their
Right.
life
So what's the
where they
ingredient that-
felt like Holden Caulfield.
What's the ingredient that an idea needs to have for you to be truly timeless?
I think it is a true human insight, right? That
Yeah.
you then translate into a brief that gets turned into an idea. By having a true human emotion, a true insight, it can last forever. People don't remember if it was an AR idea or a VR idea or a TV spot or a print ad, but they remember how that piece of communication made
Right.
them feel because it tapped into
Right.
a true human emotion,
You,
true human insight.
you did the campaign, "Can You Hear Me Now?" from Verizon, which I do believe that it could be categorized as a timeless piece because "Can You Hear Me Now?" is very much like something that's even to this day. I mean, you say that campaign is from 2001.
Yeah, correct.
And but to this day, after so many years, it's still like something that like can be applied to 2023.
Yeah, I mean, it started with a really simple brief. I mean, the brief was that we wanted to prove network superiority, that their network worked better than anyone else's. And when we were thinking about it, when we were working on ideas for the campaign, we came across this true fact that the company, Verizon, had this test where they had people driving around the country and it tested the network every 3 feet. And we said, that's an amazing thing that you're so obsessive about the quality of your network that you test it every 3 feet on roads all over the country. And then we came to the idea, well, what if we had somebody going around the country testing it? And then it was, well, what would the person say? And I mean, it was pretty easy to come up with. He would say, "Can you hear me now?"
That's good.
Right? Because, that's what everyone was saying at the time. I mean, it was, you couldn't get off of a cell phone call at the time without someone saying, "Can you hear me now?"
Right.
And then what we wanted was, "Yeah, I can hear you."
We do actually every day. Like,
Yeah.
"You're mute. Can you hear me now?"
Yeah,
Yeah, I
exactly.
can hear you now.
Well, and God forbid I drop a phone call.
Right.
So if I'm on my mobile phone and I lose coverage and I can't get on, the second I call somebody back, the first thing they say to me is,
Can you hear me now? Okay, man.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, great, thank
It's
you.
awesome. Okay, Beach World is a short science fiction story by Stephen King. It was first published in Weird Tales, 1984. It is set at an unspecified time in the distant future. Among the few clues to the date is the passing reference that the last of the Beach Boys had died 8,000 years previously. The story recounts the catastrophic crash landing of a spacecraft of an uncharted planet made entirely on sand and no ocean. During one of the public readings of the novel, someone asked Stephen King, "Why do you choose to write about these things?" And he said, "Why do you assume that I have a choice? Do you believe in fate tapping us on the shoulder and making us do things, not necessarily on a creative space, but anything in life that we do? Were you drawn to advertising by an invisible force? Was in your destiny? Was in your map? Or you just jump into it?"
I do believe in fate.
You believe in faith.
I do. I believe
In faith or destiny?
well.
Because they are two different
well,
things.
maybe you're right. Maybe I believe in destiny.
Okay.
Is because I started writing books at a very young age. I wrote a book when I was 5 years old.
Okay.
And I always knew that I wanted to do something creative. I didn't know that it was going to be advertising. I thought that perhaps I would be an actor. Perhaps I'd be a screenwriter. Perhaps I would be a fiction writer. And then I fell in love with journalism. And I was an editor of a school newspaper. And I went to school to be a journalist. I wanted to be Bob Woodward, Carl Bernstein.
Right.
I wanted to work for the New York Times or the Washington Post. And so I went to school to be a journalist. I never took a single class in advertising. I hadn't even considered a career in advertising until I got out of school. And I had my first job working at a newspaper, and I absolutely hated it. And then I needed a release for my creative abilities.
Right.
And I literally bumped into advertising. And I felt that I was pretty good at it pretty fast, because my mind works in a way that allows me to take lots of information from my journalistic background, lots of information, and synthesize it to a single headline or a single thought very quickly. And I loved it. I loved the rush that it was always different. I loved the rush that I was doing things that had never been done before. I loved the collaboration with other people, art directors, designers, photographers, filmmakers. But I had no idea that I'd be doing this. None. Zero. It was not even a consideration. I actually tell that story to my son right now, who is at university. And I said, I remind him that I had no idea what I would be doing when I was his age.
It's funny. It reminds me of this movie called Big Kahuna. It was a movie featuring Danny DeVito and Kevin Spacey, and there is like a speech at the end of this movie. It's called like "Wear Sunscreen," and it's written for a long time. Internet's web believed that this speech was written by Kurt Vonnegut under a pen name, but it actually wasn't. It was some screenwriter wrote this speech. It became famous. It also was adapted into a song, and throughout the speech, there is this sentence says like some of the most interesting people I know at the age of 14 didn't know what to do with their lives.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that is true. For me, it was different though. For me, it was always very clear that the only thing I could do it was like writing, and so I just went straight there. But I say this to my daughters, the oldest one. I think like in my case, I truly only had one talent, and I am a complete disaster in everything else. So it came so natural to me just to narrow down and say, yeah, that's the only thing I can really do in this life, on this earth. And there is nothing else that I can do. I'm really a disaster at everything else. So it came out and it was like, okay, that's natural. So it was so quick. In fact, advertising, to this day, when people even ask me, like, what do you do? Even though, like, you have this fancy title, pretty much what I do, I write.
Yeah,
so
that's
I
what
say I'm
to
a
people.
writer.
Yeah. I say the same
And
thing.
it hasn't changed a iota. So
Yeah.
this is the only job I've done in my life. And
Yeah.
like, and it's going to end up being the only job I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. And sometimes it's a curse to be able to do many things.
Mhm.
That's what I wanted to get. Sometimes it's a curse
Yeah.
to be multi-talented because like you don't have then the energy to focus on one thing and crack it. Charles Bukowski used to say, find what you love and let it kill
Yeah.
you.
Well, I say the same exact thing. When most people ask me what I do, I say I'm a writer.
Yeah.
Because I think that's how I've always defined myself. I think now, as I've progressed in my career, one of the things that I take great pride in is being able to spot talent from unusual places. People who, like me, did not have an advertising degree or an advertising background, but finding people who were history majors or podcasters or people from very, very different ways of expressing their creativity,
Definitely.
and then bringing them into the industry and seeing the amazing things they do.
That's interesting. Talking about writer, now the next question is about Nobel Prize, GM Coates. At least I pronounce Coates, but it's a Nobel Prize, and he holds dual citizenship, Australian and South African. He embodies like the transatlantic spirit, having crossed the ocean multiple times throughout his life. He moved to the United Kingdom in 1962 and worked as a computer programmer for IBM in London. His experiences were recounted later in life in one of his books called Youth that was published in 2002. And then his second volume of fictionalized memories came out after that. And there is a quote from him that really like struck a chord in me. And the quote goes, "There seemed nothing to do but live." How do you recount your youth in advertising? Did you find that it was really hard to focus, or were you always like a straight arrow, flying like straight and knowing like where to go and how to do it?
You know, my early career was defined by learning because I did not know anything about advertising prior to being in the industry. My first copy chiefs or my first creative directors were my professors.
Right.
And I had some really good ones. I was incredibly fortunate that I worked with some amazing, amazing people. And I think I had the unfortunate moment of having a lot of success very early in my career, which sort of tainted me a little bit to thinking that I knew everything. And I think I stopped learning for a little bit.
That's interesting.
So I'll tell you a very quick story. I worked with a creative director, famous creative director, Tony Granger.
Oh, Tony Granger,
Yeah, from South Africa. And Tony Granger had a very interesting analogy about my career. And I remember this to this day because it had such an impact on me. And I think my career trajectory changed and improved dramatically because of one conversation that Tony Granger and I had. It was in early February. It was the day after the Super Bowl. And that particular year, I had written 3 commercials that were on the Super Bowl. So I was feeling as good about my career and as good about myself as you could at that moment. You know, when you have 3 commercials on the Super Bowl, it's a big deal.
It's like so rare.
Tony Granger pulled me into his office and he said, "We have to have a talk about your career." And he said that my career reminded him of John Travolta.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And he said, early in John Travolta's career, he did a lot of things right, and he was really, really popular, and everything was great. And then John Travolta got lazy, and he did a lot of things that were really bad in the middle of his career. Then John Travolta had Pulp Fiction,
Right.
and it reinvented him. He said, "That's your career. You did really well in the beginning, you got really lazy, and then you had Verizon. And Verizon helped you take off again." He said, "Your job is to use that and to continue to move up and not get lazy." And I think I use that motivation every day in my career now. I think I work harder than I've ever worked before because I'm never going to let anyone outwork me.
Right.
I don't win on brute force. I work by out thinking, out planning, out creating the competition. And that all stems from that conversation with Tony Granger,
So interesting, man.
who said, "Don't get lazy."
There is these moments in that I have. It's a very, very like fascinating stories because even when I look at my career, I had a different path. But if I were to compare, like, you know, my career had many years. I'd say almost a decade, where I care about everything else but advertising. Yeah, I was at the right place at the right time, and it got easier for me. But I wasn't focused on the work. I had other like things in life going on, like, you know, on a creative side. And it almost like it reminds me like when and I wasn't focused on the work, but it reminds me when Charles Bukowski say, "I spent 10 years of my life drinking, but those 10 years of my life when I didn't write a single word got me to where I am now because that's where I got all the knowledge." And I felt that. I can see now when I sit down and try to crack an assignment, like, you know, creativity is a continuous fallback, either onto your childhood or whatever happened in the past. That's when you go and rob the bank of your memories and you
Sure.
bring it back.
Yeah.
And I think happens to me that those are the years that I savagely take apart and like and you know rob memory from or ideas from things I've seen, things I've done, and bring it back to the creativity now. So
Yeah,
that's interesting.
yeah. I mean, when I had that conversation with Tony, I hated that conversation. Right? I walked out of that room, and I was angry, and I was upset, and it was not a very pleasant conversation. But looking back on it, that was the moment that I said, you know, I'm never going to have anyone say that to me ever again.
Good. Fifth question. Up to a quarter of fish in fish farms have stunt growth and float lifelessly at the surface of the tanks. These fish are known as dropouts. According to research by Royal Society Open Science, these fish exhibit behaviors and brain chemistry almost identical to those of very depressed people. As a matter of fact, fish are capable of complex behavior, and their brain system has a lot of similarity with that of mammals, including human. This is something I learned while researching for a short story I was writing a few years back. Now, you dove into the world of pharma, and you made it rich with creativity. Now, what's the single most interesting discovery you've made along the journey in pharma? When I found out that so funny, man, about fish. When I found out that fish display like behavior and they're like dropouts, fish that they are depressed. you reconnect me to a movie I love endlessly, which is like Rumblefish. And Rumblefish, like, is a beautiful scenes, like, Mickey Rourke and Matt Dillon looking through the fish tank, and they're looking at this colored fish, and everything is in black and white. And Mickey Rourke is talking about Rumblefish, and Rumblefish is a particular fish that is very aggressive. When he see his reflection, he think is another fish, so he attack. So he attack his own body, attack his own reflection. They call Rumblefish. What discovery have you made?
I think the thing that I've discovered in healthcare advertising is it's a marathon, not
It's
a
a
sprint.
marathon.
That I start working on projects 2 years before they're going to release. There's very, very few times where you come up with an idea and a month later it's in market. It's almost unheard of in healthcare advertising. It takes months. It can spend 45 days with getting government regulators to look at something. So the thing that I think we all learn is to keep an idea, a really precious, beautiful idea alive, takes years of vigilance. It's going to every meeting, every focus group. You can't take your eye off of it for a moment, because the second you do, there'll be some regulator or someone saying you can't do it. And there's always a way to do it. I've, in my 15 years in healthcare, I've never once had a government body or a regulator say you couldn't do something. They'll try to find ways to change it, but they'll never say you can't. So by being in the room and trying to work the conversation to find, okay, if I can't do this, can I do that? What about this and this versus that? So you have to be willing to put in the time and the effort. If you think you're going to come in, write something brilliant, and walk out and it's going to be done, you're wrong. It's just never going to happen. It's a marathon. I mean, the things that I'm working on now, are not going to be in market until 2025. I mean, it's crazy. And that makes it really hard to change an agency culture or an agency reel overnight, because you can't. When I took my job, when I switched agencies and I came to Klick almost 5 years ago, the owners asked me how long it would take to get from where they were to where they wanted to be. And I told them it would take 5 years. And they thought it would take 2 years. I said, that's impossible. 2 years is impossible. It's going to take at least 5 years. And it has. It's taken, I think we're maybe a little ahead of schedule than where we thought we would be. But it's a long time. It's hard work.
It is. I mean, long-term project and marathon, definitely like something in pharma, because as you say, I think like when you work in that industry, you are dependent on like research and discoveries and
Absolutely.
approval from the FDA, and all
Sure.
these things happen like very slowly.
Absolutely.
Or at least they don't happen as quickly as other things in advertising we're used to. So I always like have a little bit of experience in pharma, not as yours, of course, but I think whenever I get my toe into pharma, like the first thing that comes to me is the timing that is different. It's almost like if you have to reset the clock.
Sure.
You come from advertising and you go into pharma, the first thing you do, I think you need to look at your watch and reset it.
But the
yeah.
beauty of that, let me tell you the positive of that, is that you stay away from things that are incredibly trendy.
Yeah.
Because by the time this comes out, that trend is over, right? So you do look for things that are more timeless, more human,
with more substance.
with much more substance. I mean, it's life or death.
Of course,
I don't need to find the drama in a project, because the drama is already there.
Of course. Okay, you are actually there is another question that I would like to ask you. Once there was a country that was too small for all its inhabitants to fit inside at once. This storyline of a novella called like The Brief and Fragmenting Reign of Phil. I don't know if you read the book, but if you haven't, please do, because it's a miraculous like novella. Very short book, but like so imaginative. The story focuses on the border disputes between the countries of Inner and Outer Horner, with an absurdist wit as a playful as Monty Python and a vision as dark as Samuel Beckett's. It's literally a blending between the two of them. In reality, the author, George Saunders, wanted to explore the human tendency to continuously divide the world in dualities. I can see the same happening in our business. There are creative who work on pharma, there are creative who work in advertising. There was more duality back then, there is still duality right now. For a lot of creative, let's face the truth, when you mention, oh, you work in pharma, you have a tendency to think, oh, okay, your credit juice ran out, you're now like in a different industry. Feel sorry for you. Do you think that that kind of reaction eventually is going to disappear? Or do you think that because it's pharma, because of its nature, because of things are more serious there, it always going to be that kind of reaction from creative?
I think people who are uninformed always come to their opinion in their own way. I think people who think that people who work in healthcare are not creative are not looking at the work.
Right.
And what I mean by that is just look at the largest award shows that are happening in the world today. The same exact work that is winning in health is also winning outside of health. Work that's winning in design, in health is winning in design. Work that is winning in film is also in health. So good work is good work. I think the pandemic in some ways have changed people's view on health, because all of a sudden everyone understood their health, everyone understood their importance of health, and everyone wanted to be a part of it. I actually am worried about the opposite happening, is just like everyone jumped on the bandwagon of having green,
Right.
everything being, sustainable and things like that. Now there's the opposite of everyone jumping on the health bandwagon. Instead of greenwashing, it's now health washing.
Let me ask you. I wanna put a spin on this. I wanna ask you a question.
Yeah,
When did you start in advertising? How old were you when you started in advertising?
I was 21 years old.
Okay, you're rich, 21 years old.
Yes.
You are sitting at the desk. You're 20 years old. Someone dropped two briefs at your desk.
Yep.
One is Nike.
Yep.
Brief.
Yep.
For the next branding campaign. Another one is a brief on cancer.
Yep.
What would you naturally go for? You're 21.
I think at 21,
Yeah.
I would go for cancer. And the
You
reason
will go for cancer.
and
21.
the reason being is I'm never going to invent what Nike means in your mind. Nike already has you already have an image in your mind of what Nike is. And that is from years and years of some
So
of
you
other
would have
people.
made. I just want to be sure
Yeah.
I understood this. When I say it's like, trying to unlearn everything you learned
Yeah.
all these years. So even like at 21, go back to the year like when you were 21. You didn't know anything about advertising. You got these two briefs. Would you really tell me that naturally you will approach the brief on cancer rather than like a brief on Nike? You know nothing about Nike. You go,
Yeah.
you
Okay.
back it.
So,
You know what I mean?
So there's
How would you naturally go to something so
Yeah.
heavy rather than something you're 21, like you haven't that kind of knowledge you acquired now?
it's hard to say, because you're not talking about Nike then. You're saying you're giving me a brief for a running shoe
Yeah.
and you're giving me a brief for cancer.
Mm-hmm.
which one would I choose? I don't know if I know the answer to that question. Because there would be a part of me, who's also a runner, by the way, who would be intrigued to take everything that I know
Right.
about running and bring it to this athletic shoe, right? It would be easy for me to do. It would be something that I would be very comfortable with. But then again, working on something with cancer would be incredibly uncomfortable and something that I could believe in very strongly, right? It would be like saying working on an anti-smoking campaign. At 21, I would do nothing more than want to work on an anti-smoking campaign because every member of my family smoked except for me. And I was trying to convince them all to stop smoking at the time. So I think I was always sort of clued into health in some ways. But I don't know if I could tell you today because both would tap into something in me. You know, and look, I read Phil Knight's book, right, about the founding of Nike.
Right.
And, you know, if you handed me a brief for Blue Ribbon Sports, or what it was called then, right, and you handed me for cancer, I don't know which direction I would go. The beauty is both tap into something in me as a human, and I could see myself going in either direction. If I knew nothing about either, I could see myself going in either direction. I wouldn't be attracted to the bright, shiny object of Nike. I would go for the opportunity to do something that's never been done before.
Interesting.
That's what drives me. That's what motivates me.
It's interesting because you know what, like, what I found, like, these are tricky questions, and they are also questions that, like, sometimes you think, like, okay, it's kind of like a pointless question because either way I can't rewind time. Like, you know, I think, like, whenever I play these games with my mind, what I found is very, very difficult is to learn what you learn. To really look at, like, if I think of myself when I was 21, I had to completely, like, you know, tear down all the knowledge that I acquired all these years and go back to the mindset and the state of mind that I had when I was 21 to that year, when I was 21, to the environment I was living in. And it's difficult to do it because it's almost like when time and knowledge builds, like, you know, walls on you, it's not as easy as like, let me rewind now, let me learn what I learned. It's almost impossible, and that's why it's impossible on so many different layers. So that's why, for instance, like, you know, you read books and they are, for instance, written from the point of view of a child, but you could tell that they're not really written with the mind of a child. They're written with the mind of an adult, looking at the world with an adult, using the language of a child, which is totally different. It's a really, really tough things to do. You know, and like on so many different levels. It's like, and those that they are able to do it, there are very, very, very few. And when it happens, it's a miracle. So this is a different note, but I remember when I was very young, I read Madame Bovary and Flaubert, like, nailed down the language of a woman, and like, you know, and the Bovaryism came out of that, and I couldn't believe that book was written by a man. But that book, it felt like was written by a woman, and it's like, by as a work of a genius. I think that's where, like, you really, like, have your encounter with, like, pure sheer genius of someone that I just cross, like, you know, almost like a human, like, you know, frontier, and like, it's very difficult to have this change in mindset. You know, it's like, I couldn't know, like, you know, if I were to ask the question I just asked you, I would say it's like I will go with the running shoe, but then again, this is me because I'm a hypochondriac, so maybe I would have done,
But-
you know what I mean? It's like,
But the truth of the matter is, I probably wouldn't have thought about the running shoe or the cancer treatment at 21.
Exactly.
At 21, I would have said, which one will propel my career faster,
Right. Exactly.
right? Which one will help me get noticed by other people who matter? Which one will help me win
You
an
will have
award,
other, yeah, of course.
right? Because at 21, when you have nothing, you just want people to notice your work
course.
and to appreciate your work. So I may have said which one would give me the better opportunity to get noticed. And again, that would say it's an impossible question to answer now. Probably would have been Nike.
Okay, look, last question. You are presiding over the health and wellness categories as the 2023 London International Awards. The relationship between recognition and creativity is complex. Recent studies show us what implication it has for the brain. One of them looks at the groups awarded at the Grammy in recent years. And the conclusions are very interesting. Are creativity and recognition friends? Or do they need each other? Do creative need to be recognized? Do they make each other better? What do you think? Because we creative,
Hmm?
so interesting because I always naturally go on talking about writing because that's all my life has been and I graduated in journalism as well. But I remember there was this story. I don't know if it's true or not, but when Jack Kerouac published On the Road, he was walking with his wife in the streets in San Francisco, and he stopped by a newspaper stand, and he saw his book for the very first time out there, and he had the the most tangible feeling that's okay. I got recognized. Now people start knowing who I am, and that day I don't know if it was true. I read somewhere like he vomited on the streets.
Mhm.
He literally threw up. And when asked by his wife, why did you do that? Isn't what you wanted? He say yes, but now I know that every single line I'm gonna write is gonna pay for my bill.
Mhm.
So he got locked.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think if all award shows magically disappeared, I don't think creativity would disappear.
Mm.
I think we are driven by a need to be creative and a need to try new and different things. For me, my favorite part of the creative process is the moment when you recognize that there's a unbelievable idea in the palm of your hands. I don't need to see it published. I don't
Right.
need to see it on
But do
television.
you need your peer to like? Do you need a certain level of recognition, or you could say, you know what, it doesn't really matter. Like not even if like my parents recognize me or my wife recognize on what I do, it doesn't matter because I will be doing it no matter what.
I think we all like to be recognized.
Right, of course.
Right. I think we all like that our peers like the work that we do. It also reaffirms that we've chosen the right career, that we're working with the right people, that we've chosen the right company to work for, that we've chosen the right products and projects to work on. So I think recognition helps us to keep driving us forward. But I think if that's all it was, I think we would end up feeling very empty. I think the self-fulfillment, I get much more fulfilled now by helping a creative team reach their vision of what they're trying to do, helping them see something, watching them flourish, watching their careers grow. That is incredible fulfillment for me. If the work that they do wins an award, I'm like, that's great for them. I take no
Of course.
personal fulfillment in that.
Rich, thank you so much. It was an awesome, like,
Thank you so much.
ocean crossing, like, and hopefully, like, I can meet you again.
I hope so.
It's a small word, advertising. So, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Let's go grab a coffee.